Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace. Coming at you, it is Monday, December 30th. What is up, everybody? Hopefully, you guys are having a very restful time in between the holidays here. Still had to get you a podcast because I feel like we had a pretty great week in the NBA. I'm actually going to go as far as to call it a bounce back week for the NBA, just in the wake of everybody discussing what's wrong with the NBA and troubleshooting as to why the ratings are down, if they are actually down, all that going back and forth about the health of the NBA. It feels like the NBA had a very complete week. I don't want to sound like Mr. Junior Commissioner over here, but let's just look at everything that this week brought us for the NBA. An incredible slate of games, especially on Christmas Day. We had a trade and bonus points because that trade involved the Los Angeles Lakers, everybody's favorite team. We had another trade request, I guess, or another unhappy superstar that we'll talk more about. We had a coach firing and 2 fights. And they say basketball players aren't tough. Give me a break, man. We got to talk about all that stuff and more. So sit back and enjoy. We have a lot to talk about. Before we talk about all the fun stuff that happened this week, unfortunately, we do have some bad news coming out of Orlando yet again. Mo Wagner now out for the entire season with a torn ACL. This happened about a week ago at this point, and the main reason I bring this up is because the Magic have been just decimated by injuries, and they still have found a way to be extremely competitive. Just to run through the list, you got their best player, Paolo Banchero, out with an oblique injury for the foreseeable future. You got Franz Wagner with the same exact injury out for a while longer. Now you have his brother Mo Wagner out for the year with an ACL injury. And then you have Gary Harris. I don't even know what his deal is, to be totally honest with you, but he's been like not playing the entire year as well. Kind of forgot he was on that team. But yet the Magic are still so competitive, even in that game in which they lost Mo Wagner. Cole Anthony, who had just been riding the pine for a while there, steps up, pours in 20-something points off the bench. Not only that, he had like basically a game-winning shot the other night for the Magic as well. He's one of those guys where like anytime you just like watch the Magic play, you just don't really understand why he's not like a 20-plus point per game scorer. Like he really does look the eye test of like a watered down Ja Morant with how confident that guy is, with how athletic he is, with how he can just get to his spots at will. I love Cole Anthony, so it's kind of fun to see him get some shine here, especially with him and Suggs having to carry basically all of the offensive load. I just wanted to make mention that. Again, another terrible injury for Orlando, but yet they're 20-14. They're in a pretty comfortable spot at the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, and including a massive win against the Celtics the other night, which we're going to talk more about shortly, but just wanted to give the Magic a little bit of credit here. I'm not sure how many more injuries they can take for a team that was already pretty limited offensively, but if Cole Anthony has any say, the Magic might just be just fine hanging around as one of those middle of the pack teams in the Eastern Conference, and then maybe they can even tread water until Franz and Paolo come back at some point this season. Some other bad news for Wolves fans anyways. I just had to know, I know that this is damn near 2 weeks old at this point, but I just wanted to mention how dominant Karl Anthony Towns was in his return to Minnesota. 32 points, 20 rebounds, and 6 assists in a dominant 133-107 win over the Knicks. It's pretty sad times for the Timberwolves right now. I know that they got a win on Christmas. They are starting to turn things around a little bit, but just having Karl Anthony Towns come back in town, they had the tribute video, the whole 9 yards, as Towns definitely deserved, and he just went out and completely destroyed this Minnesota team that is kind of rudderless right now. Like, I just don't know what the fix is. They've been moving over to Dante DiVincenzo to close games, who's improved his play a little bit as of late, which is huge. They definitely need Dante to be at least 90% of what he was last year for the Knicks, and he hasn't been anywhere close to that. And they don't really have a real roster move to make. So hopefully Anthony Edwards can figure this thing out. I'm definitely rooting for the Timberwolves. But having Towns come in and just completely decimate them like we all kind of figured that would go. The Knicks are trending up and the Wolves are definitely trending in the wrong direction. Definitely had to make note of that as well before we get into the Christmas Day slate. Before we can get into the games themselves, which again were fantastic, we had some pretty wild news coming out early on Christmas morning from Shams Charania, ESPN's lead insider, basically doubling down on the report surrounding Jimmy Butler's trade request. Shams, as always, has to be very careful with like the language around this, but essentially said that Jimmy has made it clear he is prepared for his depart from Miami and that Phoenix and Golden State were atop his win now destinations. And of course, Shams had to make it a point in saying that Jimmy has been very professional with these requests, right? There's no bad blood between Jimmy and the Miami Heat as of right now. He's still going to continue to do his job, but he's made his intentions clear to ultimately leave Miami. before we even had the opportunity to let that report breathe and for people to fire up the trade machines to see how it would even be possible to get Jimmy Butler over to Golden State or Phoenix or Houston, Pat Riley came out the day after Christmas and made it extremely clear that they were not going to trade Jimmy Butler. And what this is most likely going to mean for the Miami Heat is that they have to be willing to let Jimmy Butler walk in free agency at this point in time, right? If you're not willing to make a move for him at the deadline and get something for him before he plays his last few months guaranteed to be under contract for the franchise, you obviously have to be comfortable with the reality of letting a player of Jimmy Butler's caliber walk for nothing in free agency. And that can be really detrimental. And that's really, again, I'm not going to be the guy here from my parents' basement telling Pat Riley what to do, but it is really damaging if you're already borderline middle of the pack franchise, just calling it what it is for the Miami Heat this season, and then to lose one of your most talented players for absolutely nothing. Like, you just have to assume getting some sort of draft capital, getting some sort of new player in the room that you can re-sign for cheaper or something like that would be better than taking the risk of betting on an unpredictable personality like Jimmy Butler. But all that to say, if Jimmy Butler is able to reconcile this, or the Heat are able to get it back together and get back on track, or even make another playoff run before the end of this current season, it really wouldn't be all that shocking either if Jimmy Butler ultimately decides to stay in Miami. So it is just really interesting to see the way this story's unfolded. Obviously, we talked about it a little bit on the last podcast. There was some pushback between Jimmy's agent and Shams Charania, and then Shams basically doubled down on that request on Christmas Day of all days, just for Pat Riley to put it to rest. I think it is pretty fascinating. Obviously, my takes on the destinations haven't changed all that much in a week, right? Because there hasn't been any real change there. I still think the best spot for Jimmy would be Golden State. I think that's just like the best fit for him. There or Houston make the most sense. But then again, I just tried to break out the trade machine right before this podcast and was messing around on it for a full 20 minutes, and I couldn't even get one singular move of Jimmy Butler to Golden State that made any sort of financial sense. So all that to say, I think it's, as of right now, I don't think a Jimmy trade is imminent. This is certainly not the last we're going to hear of this story, but I just wanted to keep you guys in the loop that as of right now, Pat Riley doesn't say Jimmy Butler is getting moved. All right, let's move on to the Christmas Day games themselves, because they did not disappoint at all. And if I do say so myself, it was an absolute ass whooping of the doubleheader that the NFL had going on Netflix. The ratings might say otherwise, and you know how I feel about ratings, but needless to say, the product themselves, just comparing the quality of the games between the 5 games on the NBA slate versus the 2 NFL games, it wasn't even close. These NBA games definitely did not disappoint. And we have to start things off with Spurs at Knicks. And first and foremost, I saw the NBA, among many things that they were being critiqued on over the past week or so, especially on social media. One of the things I saw in a lot of different conversations was people being upset with the slate and the teams that were ultimately selected to even have the opportunity to play on Christmas. A lot of Thunder fans that were butthurt, some Bucks fans coming off of their NBA Cup win. Some Cavs fans as well asking, why are they not playing on Christmas Day? Why are the Bucks not playing on Christmas Day? Look, I get it. It wasn't a perfect slate by any means. If I really had to nitpick, I would have loved to find a way to get the Thunder and the Cavs on there, maybe just make that a complete replacement of the last game or something like that. But the reality is that the NBA has a good problem to have, where they have a lot of teams that deserve this recognition and a lot of prominent players that they should use this opportunity to showcase. And look no further than Victor Wembanyama as a perfect example of that, right? Like, you can look at the Spurs record, you can say, what have the Spurs done to be relevant over the last 8 years? None of that matters, right? They have Wemby. And if the NBA, anyone in the NBA front office or the marketing department has a brain, they need to get Wemby in as many big games as possible, and that includes Christmas Day. And it was perfect. Get him in the first slate, get him in a game against the Knicks, and watch him cook. And Wemby's been fantastic lately. He's really coming into his own, and he didn't disappoint on Christmas. 42 points, 18 rebounds, was magnificent on both ends of the court. I'm going to sound like an old head here because even I don't love the volume of three-point shooting that Wemby has been partaking in this season. I'd love to see him just be more of a back-to-the-basket player. Not even back-to-the-basket. Just be near the hoop, dude. Just find your spots closer to the basket, and the rest will come a little bit easier. I don't think we need him taking as many threes off the dribble as what he's doing right now. But the reality is, he's making them at a pretty decent clip. He's not shooting 20% anymore like he was to start this year, and he was just a monster. And so to see anybody that actually cares about the health of the NBA not at least see the logic in putting Wemby on Christmas Day because the Spurs record is kind of mid, I don't think your head is in the right place with all this stuff. They need to get Wemby in front of a large audience. And for a lot of people, that might have been the first time that they saw Victor Wembanyama play. And they're like, what the hell is going on with that guy? I'm asking the same questions and I watch him all the time. So hopefully people enjoyed that. The Knicks on the other side obviously came away with the win. It was a super close back and forth game in which Mikal Bridges was really the hero for the Knicks. Easily his best game as a Knick. 41 points, and I love to see most of that damage being done in the mid-range area, something you don't often see. It wasn't a great Brunson game. Karl Anthony Towns ended up getting into foul trouble, so he barely played down the stretch. And so the final back and forth sequence was fantastic, and obviously a big shout out to Josh Hart, because he is just pound for pound the best rebounder in the NBA, probably. Like, he just is, being like 6'5" and corralling as many rebounds as he does, and he sealed the game with 2 consecutive offensive rebounds to run out the clock in the final seconds for the Knicks, because that's just what he does. Moving on to the next game here, we had Wolves at Mavs, which was damn near a snooze fest, and a really sad one at that for the Mavericks, especially because Luka Doncic walked away with a pretty ugly looking injury, just in the nature of it being non-contact and him immediately coming up lame. And you could just see from his facial expressions, from the way his body was moving, he was just went to the basket, passed the ball away, and just like limped right off the court. And so it was announced he has a calf strain. We're probably not going to see Luka for at least another month. I believe that's when they're going to be reevaluating him. So really crappy news for Mavericks fans, and I understand that. Moving back to the game for a second here, this one still ended up being fantastic. The Mavs took him a little bit to adjust without Luka, but look, this team has played and been a damn good team, even without Luka, in plenty of games earlier this season. Kyrie started cooking, the home crowd starts getting back into it, and before you know it, a 30-point deficit for the Mavericks becomes a 10-point deficit. The crowd is involved, and things got really scary for the Wolves down the stretch, and I just wanted to give Anthony Edwards a shout out. I was rooting for the Wolves in this game. I picked them to win. Really wanted to see them come away with it, and it was just looking ugly, man. Like, talk about having no momentum. Like, the Wolves look so rattled, and it needed to be Anthony Edwards to be the one to get to the basket, just use his athleticism to get to his spot, and he had a couple clutch buckets down the stretch that ultimately were just enough to give the Wolves a comfortable victory. Moving on to the Mavericks real quick. The Mavs are going to be just fine. Like, this team is so loaded. Klay Thompson has really been playing well lately. I love the Quentin Grimes acquisition. Najee Marshall, we're going to talk more about him in a sec, but he's a dog. Like, this Mavericks team is objectively better than last year, and they are going to have the advantage of having better cohesion because they made these moves in the offseason. I don't think they need to do anything at all at the trade deadline, and so I'd expect this team to be a much more tight-knit unit than last year. They have more talent in the building. The only thing I don't love is the Spencer Dinwiddie signing, but for any Mavs fans that are listening that are worried about this Luka injury, yeah, I know it sucks. The only real concern is, like, hey, is Luka going to be better by April, which all signs point to that being the case. So as long as Luka comes back healthy in a month, this team is going to be fine, and they're going to have no problem treading water, even what's going to be a loaded Western Conference. Moving on to the third game of the day, I really don't want to have to talk about it, but I do have to talk about it. The Celtics just shit the bed against the 76ers. They ended up losing by like 5 or 10 points, something like that. I don't even have the final score listed here. Important notes, especially from the biased Celtics fan here. No Drew Holiday. Kristaps tweaked his ankle pretty early in the game, and so he ended up leaving after like 13 minutes in the game, if I'm not mistaken. But the story of the game, I mean, stop me if you heard this before, Celtics fans, is we got cooked by Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin finished with 23 points, 8 of 11 shooting from the field, and 7 of 9 from 3. It seems like we made it a part of our strategy to just not guard him. Like, there were a couple times, like, yeah, I get it, we're caught in rotation and we're slow to help, and you have to make that cut somewhere. But early on in the game, the first couple threes that Caleb Martin drilled were just wide open. So there must have been something coming from Missoula or somebody from the coaching staff just saying, hey, we can live with this guy shooting. He hasn't been knocking him down at a high clip this year. Well, we need to understand that changes when Caleb Martin plays the Celtics. That guy is a dog. I'm sure maybe 9 of his top 10 best career games have come against the Boston Celtics at this point, between the one on Christmas and all those Miami games there. So that's really the difference in the game. And now I don't really have much else to say on the Sixers side of things. Like, yep, Embiid's back. He still looks banged up, but he even a banged up version of Embiid is still going to get to the line 10 times a game. He's still going to get you 25 points and 12 rebounds. Maxey, I've always loved his game, and it's really cool to see him ascend. Paul George is really hit or miss. It just depends on what night you watch him. I'll see a fantastic two-way game from Paul George against like the Hornets, and then you see him on Christmas Day, and you barely notice that he's out there. So there's a lot of Sixers thoughts going around. I mean, ultimately they're going to be fine. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games. Like, with how weak the Eastern Conference is, they'll have no problem working their way all the way up to at least like a 7, maybe even a 6 seed in the Eastern Conference if things break their way. So I'm not too concerned. As looking at the Celtics lately, it is worth at least raising the alarm a little bit, because now we're 5-5 in our last 10 games. Couple different theories. I'm just going to throw the more obscure one at you for you Celtics fans listening to this right now. Could just be because I'm home. Every single time I decide to watch a game with my parents, I definitely enjoy watching the Celtics with them. We lose. We are literally 0-4 of the games I've watched with my parents since coming home about a week and a half ago at this point. And so, yeah, that's a stat for you. Similar to me attending back-to-back Celtics losses during their most recent playoff run, in which they lost 3 games total. Maybe I'm just bad luck for the team. Now the theory is put to the side. The real reason the Celtics are probably struggling lately, nobody wants to hear this because the team is still extremely talented. It's hard when you have a rotating cast of guys missing games. Like we've been playing, oh, no Jaylen Brown. Oh, no Jason Tatum. Oh, no Kristaps Porzingis. Oh, this Drew Holiday shoulder injury has been going on for a while. Even Derek White has missed a game or two in the last couple months, and it adds up. It just, not having those guys on a game-to-game basis is tough. And I love Peyton Pritchard. He's been the sixth man of the year, no doubt about it. I think DeAndre Hunter, without looking at the odds for the awards, is making a huge push with how dominant he's been in Atlanta. But besides that, the award is Pritchard's to lose. But we're at the point where if Pritchard doesn't step in and have a fantastic game, like if we're missing one of those other guys and Pritchard isn't giving us that, 15 to 20 points off the bench like we've become accustomed to, now the team is in trouble because guys like Jordan Walsh, other guys off the bench, Sam Hauser's been dealing with a back injury. Like we can't expect those guys to step in and immediately contribute if we're missing other guys. And sometimes when you have a guy like Tyrese Maxey get into his spots at will, it's like, hey, it might actually be really nice to have a guy like Drew Holiday out there. So just wanted to throw it out there that as a Celtics fan, I'm not that concerned about their recent slide. I think there's a couple different factors here, but mainly having a couple of our main six guys being nicked up, even for a team that's as loaded as the Celtics, like in an NBA where there's as much talent as there is, any team can lose on any given night, and I think the Celtics just have to lock in a little bit, dealing with some mild injuries early in the season. Finally, we have arguably the best game of the day. I mean, the NBA, you can make fun of them, and maybe this is like the problem with the NBA too, is like they don't want to let go of these older stars, but I'm sorry, we don't know how many games we're going to get of Steph versus LeBron moving forward, but if they keep delivering like this, I'm never going to be the guy that complains that Lakers-Warriors is in a primetime game on national TV, on my television on a Friday night or a Wednesday night, whatever it ends up being. That game was awesome. There was no doubt about it. It was back and forth. Steph came alive after a tough slide in the past couple outings. He had like a couple different single-digit scoring nights in the past 2 weeks, which is really unlike him. So it was cool to see him firing in all cylinders. It was great to see LeBron step up. Obviously, Anthony Davis tweaked his ankle there, and he's already back and healthy, which is great news, but they were without him for that game, so it was a LeBron masterclass. And then ultimately, after Steph Curry hits a massive three off of a timeout, Mike Breen delivers a double bang, then Austin Reeves gets the ball with just enough time left to make a move on Andrew Wiggins, hard drive to the basket, and give the Lakers the win at the buzzer. That game was awesome. I mean, it is hilarious to pair those teams up against each other because you just have two older teams built around these massive global stars that are just like kind of middling. So even though it doesn't really change my opinion on the outlooks of those teams as a whole, it was really awesome to see us get another LeBron and Steph masterclass on Christmas. And then the final game of the day, Nuggets versus Suns. Again, I was pretty checked out for this one, not going to lie. But these two teams have been really frustrating lately. No Devin Booker for a while now for the Suns. And then on the Nuggets side of the ball, like you have Jamal Murray starting to play a lot better. You have Michael Porter Jr. quietly putting up the best season of his career. Even Westbrook has been productive at times. Like Strother's been solid off the bench. Like Christian Brown, I like for the Nuggets. Yet the Nuggets still are struggling. And I'm just trying to pinpoint it. Like, are there real questions about Jokic on the defensive end of the court? Absolutely. Are there massive questions about that second unit as a whole? Obviously, that's been nothing new with Denver. So I still can't place quite what's wrong with Denver. And then on the other side, you have Phoenix, which just, again, feels like they're asking way too much of Kevin Durant. Bradley Beal's still been really inconsistent. But ultimately, Phoenix was able to pull a win out on Christmas Day. And just to put a bow on the Christmas talk here, it came across my timeline, so I wanted to share that the NBA on Christmas Day averaged 5.25 million viewers and was up 84% from the 2023 Christmas Day slate. Now, if you want to come at me and be like, hey, well, those ratings are kind of misleading because last year they were on different networks and then you had the multicast and then you had the linear, whatever. I don't care. I'm not even saying these numbers are legit. I'm just saying it came across my feed organically. I thought it was interesting to share. And these numbers are overwhelmingly positive after all of the discourse that we've seen over the past 2 weeks saying the NBA is headed into the dumpster. But the best part about that is like the NBA is never going to top the NFL. And I'm not saying more people watched the NBA on Christmas than the NFL games because that obviously wasn't the case either. I'm sure the NFL ratings on Netflix were much higher. But it is just worth noting that those NFL games absolutely sucked. Like, who in their right mind thought that Russell Wilson and the Steelers were going to give the Chiefs a good game on Christmas? Not me. Not this guy. That's why I didn't watch, right? And then you go to the other game, it's like, hey, I don't know if you guys heard, like CJ Stroud had a great rookie year. Just like me, he's a podcaster. He's a podcaster now, forgot how to play football, got absolutely boat raced by the Ravens. And yes, I am pretty bitter as a fantasy football player that just got absolutely dominated in my first league championship appearance. Shout out to Peter if he's listening. I'm really butthurt. I'm really butthurt about everything. I hate the NFL. I hate how stupid the last week was. I hate that there were NFL games on Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and now Monday. I think that's ridiculous. I think they're ruining the championships for all the fantasy football nerds out there like myself. I think it's stupid to try to compete with the NBA. I hate all of it. I hate all of it. The NBA has always been a thing on Christmas. If you don't want to watch it, that's fine. We don't need to be picking between football and basketball and family. It's way too much. All right, now that we finally moved on from Christmas Day, let's talk about Boxing Day. Boxing Day in the NBA. Low-key, really good slate. Boxing Day, Canadian holiday, for those of you that don't know, December 26th. We had a really awesome slate of NBA games as well. Honestly, I can't even say that the slate was good, but because it wasn't. But we did have 3 game winners in one night. All legitimate game winners. First of which was Tyler Herro. I think he had one against the Orlando Magic, which was fantastic. Hit a shot off the dribble to ice the game. We already talked about Miami, but Herro's been a real star. And that Miami offense would be so disgusting without him, so it was cool to see him continue his awesome season with another game winner the other night. Then we have to kick things over to Portland because we have my guy Scoot Henderson, a name I have not said since like the 2023 NBA draft. He actually had a really bad take the play before where he probably could have let some clock burn and maybe worked it around for a better shot to seal the game, but he took it hard to the basket the possession before and smoked a layup, gave the Jazz an opportunity. Ultimately, they cashed out, hit a 3, tied up the game. But then Scoot put his cape on, ended up getting into the lane, hitting like a nice little fall-away jumper for the win. So, a guy that I'm rooting for. And the final game winner of the night on Boxing Day was arguably the most consequential shot of them all. We had a Jaden Ivey game winner over the Sacramento Kings. The Pistons rallied back from down 25 in a game that I actually turned off, which I was kind of mad at myself when I saw the highlights the next day. But they rallied all the way back in the game. They end up down by 3 with 1 possession left in the game. The ball gets rotated. De'Aaron Fox has a mental lapse where he is helping in the paint and then has to make a really hard closeout to the quarter on Jaden Ivey. Not only does he close out and out of control and foul Jaden Ivey, but Jaden Ivey actually drills the shot, gets fouled. It's a 4-point play, and then makes the free throw to put the Pistons up by 1, and they ultimately win the game. Now, the reason that one is so impactful is because, that was a really bad play by Fox, no two ends about it. After the game, head coach Mike Brown comes out and, didn't really mince words. And I've seen a lot of Mike Brown press conferences this year, believe it or not. And I never watch the press conferences after games, so I just see clips that get surfaced around on social media. And so I know he's one to really explain things to the media, and he always gives the media like the time of day to really break down what he saw in the games and whatnot. And so he wasn't really afraid to call guys like, hey, we can't be having mental lapses in situations like that. It starts with the culture that is set by our stars to be leaders in that situation. And so he definitely threw Fox under the bus a little bit there. And the next day, Mike Brown got fired. And so it was announced that they are moving on from head coach Mike Brown. Interim head coach Doug Christie is going to be taking the reins for the Sacramento Kings. Now, if you want to ask my opinion on should have Mike Brown been fired because of this, I'm going to say probably not. Like, I think coaching is forever the most difficult thing to really pay attention to with all the different variables taking place, especially in the NBA when you have, between 5 and 10 games happening on any given night. But it is just really funny because now that Mike Brown is fired, it's worth noting that only 2 of the last 8 Coach of the Year winners are still coaching on the same team that they won the award with. And so that includes, again, 2 of the last 8, and that includes Mark Daigneault, that literally won the award like 6 months ago at this point. So you have him that's still with the Thunder. He won in 2024. You have Mike Brown, again, just fired, who won this award in 2023 with the Kings. You had Monty Williams, who won the award in 2022 with the Suns, fired twice since winning the award in 2022. You have Tom Thibodeau, who won the award in 2021. Obviously, he's one of the 2 that's still with the current team with the New York Knicks. You have Nick Nurse, who won it in 2020. Now he's in Philly. You have Mike Budenholzer, who won the award with the Bucks in 2019. Dwayne Casey, who won the award in 2018 for the Raptors. He's been fired for a while now. And then you have Mike D'Antoni, who won the award in 2017 with the Houston Rockets. So, if you guys couldn't already tell by that theme, Coach of the Year award is forever one of the funniest awards in all of sports. At this point, it is becoming a real-life curse. And it just shows that there's so much narrative that goes into evaluating coaching, right? Like, we still can never look at coaches beyond just wins and losses unless it's a really rare, obvious, and special coaching talent where it just like overrules all that. Like, it's always going to come down to wins and losses. And once you win the Coach of the Year award and you set that precedent as a competitive team, and then you fall short of that, then it just makes it that much quicker. Like, it's way more complicated for us to get new players and undo the draft pick that we just made or undo the trade that we just made. No, let's just fire the coach, because that's always going to be the first move in that situation. So, I can't feel too bad for Mike Brown just because the Kings have been really disappointing this year. But at the very least, you can look at what people in Sacramento media had to say about that guy, and they seemed to love that guy and said he was great for the franchise and really bought into a franchise that has not done virtually any winning in a very long time now. And Mike Brown was the head coach that helped break that, I believe, 14-year playoff drought up for the Sacramento Kings. Obviously, they didn't end up winning that first round series against the Warriors, but Mike Brown did a lot of great stuff in Sacramento. Sad part about this is that Mike Brown is going to be looking for his next head coaching job. The positive note, I think Mike Brown's going to find one. He's been in the league for a while now, coached some great players. I'm sure he'll resurface as a head coach within the next couple years here. And the other positive thing is, look, Doug Christie, stud in 2K, absolute two-way demon. Been an NBA coach for a long time. Obviously, a really great career as a player as well. It's pretty cool just to see somebody that's never had the opportunity to be a head coach get that opportunity. So we'll have to see how Doug Christie does with the Sacramento Kings. And then moving on to the last couple of headlines here. Let's talk about that trade, by the way, because that took place shortly after Mike Brown was fired. And this was a trade that took place between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Brooklyn Nets. In this deal, the Los Angeles Lakers, they received Dorian Finney-Smith and Shake Milton. And in return, the Brooklyn Nets received D'Angelo Russell, Maxwell Lewis, who I am not familiar with at all, and 3 second-round picks. So let's look at this from the Lakers' perspective because they are the more competitive team here. I like the move. The Lakers were in a really tough spot personnel-wise, and it was pretty clear that D'Angelo Russell and JJ Redick, for whatever reason, were not seeing eye to eye. Obviously, D'Angelo Russell has had some highs in Los Angeles. Like, he's still a really talented scorer. He's just really up and down. Like, that's the best thing I can say about D'Angelo Russell is, like, sometimes you watch him and the highlights are incredible, and he's so locked in, and he's controlling the whole offense, and he's shooting at a high clip from deep, and he's making difficult shots, and at other times he's checked out defensively, he's making mistakes all over the place, he's turning the ball over, the shots aren't falling, and he's just one of the more inconsistent players that I watch on a night-to-night basis. And that type of inconsistency for a team that's under increased pressure, just playing in a market like Los Angeles, being teammates with LeBron James, like, it's just not going to fly. And ultimately the team has moved in the direction where LeBron James is there, Anthony Davis is there. I think Austin Reeves is a legitimate third star at this point, and it's not being hyperbolic in the wake of the Christmas Day game winner. Austin Reeves has been awesome for the Lakers for a couple years now, and especially this season, he's taken it to another level. And if you're looking for an on-ball creator, on-ball shooter / scorer outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves is going to do that job better than anybody else. The issue is that, obviously, LeBron at this stage in his career isn't defending anybody. Austin Reeves is not the best defender. And then you're really looking for answers besides Anthony Davis on the defensive end of the court with how you want to fill out the rest of that lineup. And the Lakers really didn't have anybody in that 3-and-D mold. Like, they're giving Max Christie starts because he gives them a little bit more effort than most guys. You know, they've been giving Cam Reddish the nod from time to time just for his defensive tenacity. I think Dorian Finney-Smith is going to be better than Rui Hachimura. He's going to be better than Cam Reddish, Max Christie. He's going to be better than all those guys. And so somebody that's actually willing to step in and knows he's going to be taking the most difficult defensive assignment on any given night is exactly what the Lakers need. He's also having a career year shooting from 3. He's over 43% for the first time in his career he's been that high. Second leading season as far as points per game as well. He's been scoring like 11 points per game. And the nice thing as well is that he's actually played on some competitive teams, right? He was there as a part of the deal that brought Kyrie Irving into Dallas, and so he was obviously on a pretty good Mavs team before that. He's played alongside Luka Doncic, so he's going to get the memo. Hey, stand in the corner, shoot threes at a high clip on offense, and do what I've been doing my whole career and just play defense. That's exactly what the Lakers need, and he also gives them a little bit more size than D'Angelo Russell as well. Where the buck stops is we've seen enough Shake Milton to know he's like pretty streaky at this point. I don't trust anything that he's going to give you consistently, and so I don't even really expect him to be a part of the Lakers rotation unless Gabe Vincent gets even more washed or somebody else gets hurt. So I really just think it ends up being, from the Lakers' perspective, Dorian Finney-Smith for D'Angelo Russell. From the Nets side of things, I think I like it as well. They obviously have a ton of wing players already, and they have a lack of on-ball creation. I guess the Nets are still in a decent spot now that they have Cam Thomas, who just came back from injury, I believe, last game. Now they have D'Angelo Russell there, but ultimately, D'Angelo Russell is a higher ceiling player, right? He can obviously create for others. He can score the ball at a higher clip. He can create things out of structure. That is exactly what D'Angelo Russell has always been able to do. And his best years in the entire NBA and the only All-Star appearance of his entire career came when D'Angelo Russell was in Brooklyn several years ago as well. So it just makes sense the Nets would be willing to try that out, try and bring in somebody with a little bit bigger name, potentially overall higher talent, and get a couple extra second-round picks to boot. I know that's kind of boring to just say that the trade was just a good, logical trade for both sides, but that's genuinely what it is. I think if Lakers fans ultimately are going to end up getting mad at DFS once he has like a bad shooting night, because that's just what Lakers do, and they haven't actually watched the guy play before, he's not going to save the franchise, but he is going to play his role better than anybody else on the team currently. finally, we have to talk about the fights, man. Like, maybe I buried the lead a little bit here, but we did have a scuffle between the Suns and the Mavericks, two teams that notoriously hate each other's guts. I mean, the Mavs just dog walked the Suns every step of the way during this rivalry, and it really wasn't any different in the scuffle on the game on Friday night. Again, this was Boxing Day. Hey-o, big one for Boxing Day here between Najee Marshall and Nurkic of the Suns. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really have a take. It's not like I'm a fan of either of these teams, but something about the way it went down. I watched the fight several times. Just for some context, Jokic is posting up Daniel Gafford and then kind of hits him in the face with his shoulder and then extends his arm after the play to like make sure he connected with him. Obviously, the refs called it correctly and called an offensive foul on Nurkic. Gafford went down pretty hard. And then Najee Marshall, it's been told by people that he was a pretty good teammate in New Orleans and he always has his guys back. He was the first one that got in his, right up to Nurkic, got in his face. I kind of shoved him like a little bit, like definitely had his hands on Nurkic's chest. And then Nurkic just comes across with a slap to the face. And Marshall wasn't playing around. He immediately threw a punch and it didn't really connect and it got broken up. Bonus points to Najee Marshall, though, because Nurkic did trip and fall after. In real time, it looked like it was a result of the punch. It absolutely was not the case upon further review. But ultimately, Nurkic was ejected and suspended for a little bit because they both threw a punch/slap. Same thing for Najee Marshall. I think PJ Washington got ejected as well. And so really my only take on that is I love it. I think it's great for the game. I think it's good for the rivalry. I love that it's between two teams that notoriously hate each other. And for a new player in that rivalry to just step in Najee Marshall and just understand the assignment, like, hey, we really hate the Suns. That's really my take on that. And then finally, just in the moment, I was rooting for Najee Marshall. I can't lie. Like Nurkic, he seems really punchable. The second scuffle we had here, the final thing I wanted to talk about in this podcast, took place last night in a game between the Miami Heat and the Houston Rockets, in which the Heat actually nudged out a pretty gutty win over the Rockets. Tyler Hero with another fantastic game. Almost 30 points, 9 assists. And in the final seconds, once the Heat already had the game in hand, tensions boiled over between him and one of my favorite players in the entire NBA, Amen Thompson. He did not enjoy the commentary from Tyler Hero. They end up getting kind of tangled up at the end of the game there. And basically, Amen Thompson just lifts up Tyler Hero and just puts him down like a child, essentially. And obviously it took place by the Heat's bench, so it got broken up pretty quickly, so there really wasn't much of a fight besides the fact that Tyler Hero kind of looked like a little boy in that situation. But my biggest takeaway of both of the scuffles that we saw was the closeout speed of somebody not involved in either altercation, Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier's closeout in the fight last night was ridiculous. That man went from the bench to on top of Amen Thompson in less than 2 seconds of real time. And for Celtics fans like myself and maybe Hornets fans out there, I don't know if you got to see that side of Terry or what. Terry Rozier is a dog. That is my biggest takeaway. Terry's always been a dog. He will always be a dog. And my hot take, my zag, if you will, Terry Rozier would whoop everybody's ass in the NBA. Not even just everybody that was in an altercation this week. And he might be the 101 selection if you had to take one NBA player and drag him into a street fight. What is it? The Max Kellerman line. You know, the Martians have the death beam pointed at Earth. He wants Iguodala. I want Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier is a dog. That's all I got to say. That is going to do it for this podcast today. Just some stupid stuff there to close it out with. But hopefully you guys enjoyed a fantastic week in the NBA. It had something for everybody. Again, just to recap, you had a great Christmas Day slate. The Celtics haters out there, they got a big loss in front of everybody. I'm sure most of the NBA enjoyed that. You had a trade, you had a coach firing, you had a couple fights, something for everybody, right? So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed breaking it down. And hopefully you guys are having a fantastic holidays. Realized I dropped the ball. Didn't say Merry Christmas on the last podcast, despite the wonderfully festive background we have here in my parents' basement. So Merry Christmas to you guys. Hopefully you have a Happy New Year. I should be back next week. Thinking of doing the tier ranking episode. I know I've teased it a few times now, but I'll be back in my home studio so I can definitely bring you guys a tier ranking. Now that I've had the opportunity to get caught up on all the teams, I feel pretty well prepared on all this stuff. I think we have a firm idea of where all these teams are sitting at as we head into 2025. So hopefully I can bring you guys that episode next week. But before that, be sure to follow @Words with Wallace on everything. That includes Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to support the show on social media @Words with Wallace on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.